The night had fallen heavy over the suburban neighborhood, the kind of night where the air seemed colder than it should have been, and the streets carried a silence that felt almost unnatural, as though something unseen was watching from the shadows. Officer Daniels tightened his jacket and kept his pace steady, his hand gripping the leash of his trusted partner Rex, a strong German shepherd who had earned the reputation of being the most disciplined dog in the entire department. Rex was not just any canine. He was the product of years of rigorous training, endless drills, repeated exercises, and commands barked until they became second nature. Every officer knew Rex as the model of obedience. If Daniels said sit, Rex sat. If Daniels said heel, Rex would never break stride. It was this unwavering loyalty to commands that made Daniels proud to have him by his side. Tonight was supposed to be a routine patrol, a quiet walk through a park that rarely saw any crime, and Daniels almost allowed his mind to drift into the false security that nothing could go wrong in such a quiet, seemingly safe corner of the city. But Rex was different tonight. Daniels noticed it first when the dog's ears pricked sharply, his head tilting ever so slightly as his nose twitched. That something carried on the wind. Daniels gave a gentle tug at the leash, murmuring for him to heel. But Rex's paws seemed to stiffen on the path, claws scraping lightly against the pavement. His low growl vibrated against the silence, and Daniels frowned, scanning the area. To his eyes, the park was empty, the benches quiet, the swings motionless, the trees nothing more than dark silhouettes against the dim glow of the lamps. "Easy, boy," Daniels muttered, his voice calm, but Rex didn't settle. The growl grew deeper, his chest rumbling with a sound Daniels had rarely heard except in moments of real danger. But to Daniels, it looked like nothing was wrong. He couldn't see what Rex had already sensed. Ahead, past the shadows of a row of benches, sat a young boy. His small figure seemed almost swallowed by the dark, his shoulders hunched and his eyes darting nervously as though he wished someone would see him. And someone already had. Leaning close to him, partially hidden by the shade of the trees, was a man, a stranger with a crooked smile, speaking in a voice too low for Daniels to hear, but clear enough in tone to unsettle the boy. The stranger's hand rested too close to the child, his posture too insistent, and every line of the boy's body screamed discomfort. Rex's instincts flared hotter. He could smell the tension, the fear rolling off the boy, the unfamiliar, an unsettling odor of the stranger's sweat and intent. He pulled harder at the leash, body lowering, eyes locked on the scene ahead, muscles coiled like springs waiting to release. Daniels tightened his grip, annoyed now. "Rex, leave it," he said firmly, trying to correct him. But Rex didn't obey. His head never moved from its target, his body straining harder. Daniel's confusion deepened. This was not like Rex at all. The dog who had never once disobeyed was suddenly refusing to listen, breaking his perfect record of obedience. Daniels scanned again, but all he saw was a man and a boy on a bench, something that at first glance might have seemed normal. Yet Rex saw more, felt more, knew more, and Daniels, despite his tugging on the leash, had no idea that his dog was seconds away from making the most important choice of his life, choice that would go against every command ever drilled into him, a choice that would save a child. The chill in the air pressed closer, the silence of the park grew heavier, and Rex's growl deepened into a warning that even Daniels couldn't ignore. Something was wrong, very wrong. Rex's growl was no longer a quiet warning, but a deep vibration of urgency, and before Daniels could tighten the leash, the powerful German shepherd lunged forward, pulling with a force that nearly yanked the officer off his feet. Daniels barked a sharp command, his voice stern and commanding, "Rex, heel." But this time the dog did not even flinch at the order. For years, Daniels had relied on Rex's flawless obedience, his training so ingrained that even the slightest command was followed without hesitation. But tonight, that bond of order and discipline was suddenly fractured. As though Rex knew something his handler didn't, Daniels tried again, tugging at the leash with practiced authority, but Rex dug his claws into the ground and pulled harder, eyes locked ahead, muscles rippling under his coat with unrelenting determination. For a brief second, Daniels considered forcing him back, but there was something in Rex's stance, something in the way his body vibrated with urgency that made him hesitate just long enough for the leash to slip from his grip. And that single slip was all Rex needed. With a powerful bound, Rex charged toward the bench where the boy sat frozen in fear beside the stranger. The man's head jerked up in surprise, his crooked smile faltering as the sight of a fully trained police canine barreling toward him broke through his calm act. The boy's eyes widened, not in fear of the dog, but in sudden relief, as if he had been silently begging for someone, anyone, to save him. Daniels sprinted after Rex, his boots pounding against the path, his voice carrying sharp commands that Rex ignored completely, his instincts overriding years of drilled obedience. For Rex, this was no training exercise, no routine patrol. It was a threat, raw and immediate, and his sole purpose was to protect. The stranger shifted uncomfortably, trying to mask his sudden alarm, and muttered quickly, "Easy there, officer. I was just helping the kid find his way." But his words were slick, unconvincing, dripping with the kind of overconfidence that only faltered when faced with the snarling teeth of a German shepherd. Rex positioned himself between the boy and the stranger, his body low, fur bristling, teeth bared in a growl that warned of violence if the man moved a muscle. Daniels arrived seconds later, his heart hammering as he took in the scene. His first instinct was to reprimand Rex, to pull him back for his blatant disobedience. But then he saw the boy's trembling hands clutching the edges of the bench, his eyes wet and wide with silent terror, his lips forming the smallest of whispers. "Please don't let him take me." Daniels froze, his training telling him to assess, to stay calm, but inside he felt the sharp stab of realizing had seen the truth before he had. The man, who was now trying to compose himself under Daniel's sharp glare, had positioned himself too close, his hand hovering far too near the boy's arm, his posture defensive rather than helpful. "Step away from the child," Daniels ordered, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. The stranger raised his hand slowly, forcing a chuckle as he said, "It's not what it looks like, officer. I was just making sure the boy was safe." But Daniels caught the flicker of fear in his eyes, the twitch in his jaw as Rex's growl deepened to a sound so primal it sent a chill crawling through the air. The boy shook his head violently, finally finding his voice in a trembling stammer. He wanted me to go with him. I didn't want to. He said not to scream." Daniel's pulse quickened, his grip on his holster tightening as the weight of the situation sank in. This was no misunderstanding, no innocent encounter. This was a predator caught in the act, and if not for Rex's refusal to obey, a child might have been taken that night. Daniels called for backup over his radio, his eyes never leaving the stranger. And in that tense standoff, Rex remained immovable, a living barrier of muscle, instinct, and loyalty that refused to back down. Daniels realized with both awe and humility that his partner had saved him from failing to see the danger, and that tonight Rex had chosen the boy's life over blind obedience to commands. The park that had been wrapped in eerie silence only moments before now pulsed with tension so thick that even the air seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stood firm, his voice steady as he held the stranger at gunpoint, but inside his thoughts raced with the chilling confirmation of what was unfolding before his eyes. The boy trembled violently, gripping the bench as if it were the only solid thing keeping him from collapsing. His small voice, broken and fragile, repeated words that pierced the night. He wanted me to go with him. He told me not to scream. He said my parents sent him. Each word shattered any shred of doubt, and Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened, his jaw locking with anger. The stranger, however, tried to recover his composure, his smile forced and his voice oily with false calm. "The kid is confused, officer," he said, his hands raised but his eyes darting, calculating, like a cornered animal looking for a way to escape. But Rex did not allow a single inch of movement. The German shepherd's growl deepened into something primal, his body rigid as a wall, his gaze burning into the man with the kind of instinctive certainty only a dog could carry. Daniels trusted Rex more than the stranger's words, and in that moment he understood with absolute clarity that it was not his own observation that had saved the boy, but Rex's unshakable intuition. Daniels quickly moved, his voice sharp as he ordered the man to turn around and place his hands behind his back. The stranger hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the trees, perhaps weighing whether he could bolt into the darkness, but one low, guttural snarl from Rex crushed the thought instantly. With deliberate slowness, the man obeyed, and within seconds, Daniels had him in cuffs, his radio crackling with confirmation that backup was on its way. The boy let out a sob of relief, tears streaking his cheeks as he realized the danger was truly over. Daniels knelt briefly by his side, his voice softening as he reassured him that he was safe now, that nobody would take him anywhere. The boy nodded through tears, his small hand instinctively reaching toward Rex, who lowered his head gently, breaking his threatening posture to nuzzle the boy's trembling fingers in a gesture of comfort. It was a striking contrast. The same teeth that had been bared in warning moments before were now symbols of safety to the child. When backup units arrived, the park was flooded with red and blue lights, the silence replaced with the sharp sounds of radios and footsteps. The officers took the stranger into custody, running his name through their systems, and what they discovered made Daniel's chest tighten with both dread and grim vindication. The man was no stranger to the law. He was a wanted criminal with a history of attempted abductions, his record riddled with charges that painted a horrifying picture of his predatory behavior. Daniel's stomach churned at the thought of how close this child had come to becoming another victim, and he looked down at Rex, who sat calmly beside him now, no longer straining at the leash, his instincts having completed their duty. The boy's parents, who had been frantically searching the neighborhood, arrived at the scene minutes later. The moment they saw their son standing there, safe and unharmed, they ran forward, collapsing into a tearful embrace. The mother's sobs echoed through the night as she held her son tightly, whispering words of gratitude through her tears, while the father shook Daniel's hand firmly, his voice breaking as he thanked him and Rex over and over. But Daniels knew the truth. This rescue had not been his doing. If it had been up to him alone, trusting only his human judgment, he might have dismissed Rex's behavior as a distraction. He might have walked away. And the thought sent a shiver down his spine. Standing there, watching the family's tearful reunion, Daniels realized just how extraordinary his partner was. Rex had not just been a trained tool of the police force, bound by obedience to his handler. He had been something more, something instinctive, intuitive, and fiercely protective. A guardian who knew when to follow his own judgment instead of commands. Daniels knelt beside him, running his hand through the thick fur of his neck, his voice low but full of respect. "You disobeyed tonight, Rex," he murmured, "and it was the bravest, smartest thing you could have done." Rex responded, with a soft nudge of his nose, as if he understood. For Daniels, the lesson was etched deeply. Sometimes true heroism doesn't come from following orders, but from knowing when to break them. The park, once heavy with dread, now carried the glow of flashing lights and the sound of gratitude. And at the center of it all was a canine, who had trusted his instincts over commands, and in doing so had saved a child from a fate too dark to imagine in the days that followed. News of Rex's courageous act spread far beyond the precinct walls, carried through local papers, evening broadcasts, and community whispers that spoke with awe about the canine who had broken his training to save a child. The story became something of a legend almost overnight, parents speaking of him as the guardian of the neighborhood, officers retelling the incident with admiration, and children pointing with wide-eyed excitement whenever they spotted Rex and Officer Daniels on patrol again. For the department, it was more than just another case closed, was a reminder of the fine balance between training and instinct, and how sometimes the line between the two was what determined life and death. Daniels watched all of this unfold with quiet pride, though inside he wrestled with his own reflection of the event. For years he had built his career around discipline, order, and the absolute certainty that commands must be followed without hesitation, and Rex had always embodied that principle perfectly. But that night, everything had shifted. Rex had chosen to break free of control, to ignore direct orders, and in doing so, he had achieved something greater than Daniels ever could have commanded. The boy was alive, safe in the arms of his family, because Rex had trusted his instincts over blind obedience. The recognition did not end within the community. The department held a small but heartfelt ceremony to honor Rex's bravery, a rare acknowledgement for a canine, where officers, families, and even city officials gathered to witness the moment. Daniels stood at the front, his hand resting gently on Rex's head as the chief spoke about the event, calling it a reminder that heroes sometimes come with fur and 4 legs. Applause echoed through the hall as Rex sat tall, his golden brown eyes calm and steady, as though the fanfare meant little to him. For Rex, it had never been about medals or praise. He had simply done what he knew was right, what his instincts told him to do. Yet for everyone in attendance, it was a moment that would not be forgotten. Among the crowd was the young boy and his parents, who had insisted on being there. When they were invited to the front, the boy carried a small folded paper in his hands, clutching it nervously until Daniels knelt so Rex could see. With a shy smile, the boy handed over the paper. On it was a crayon drawing of a German shepherd with a red cape flowing behind him, and underneath, in uneven letters, the words, "Read, my hero, Rex." Daniels felt his throat tighten as he pinned the drawing to the station board, knowing that no official award could ever mean as much as those simple words from a child whose life had been spared. In the weeks that followed, Daniels noticed a subtle change in his own perspective. He no longer viewed obedience as the ultimate standard, but began to recognize that true partnership with a canine meant trusting the dog's instincts as much as the dog trusted his commands. He allowed Rex more freedom during patrols, watching carefully as the dog's senses picked up details no human eye could detect. There was a newfound respect between them, an unspoken understanding that they were not just handler and dog, but equals in the pursuit of protection and service. The bond between them deepened, forged not by drills or commands, but by a moment of defiance that had revealed the depth of Rex's courage. Daniels often replayed that night in his mind, imagining how differently it could have ended had he forced Rex back, had he ignored his dog's instincts and carried on with the patrol. The thought chilled him, a reminder that trust sometimes means stepping back and allowing another's wisdom to lead. The boy's parents continued to keep in touch, sending notes of gratitude and updates about how their son was healing from the trauma. Each time Daniels visited with Rex, the boy would rush forward with a wide smile, throwing his arms around the dog's neck, whispering thanks into his fur. Rex would stand patiently, his tail wagging slowly, his calm demeanor never changing, yet his eyes softening with recognition. To that child, Rex would forever be the hero who appeared in the darkest moment, a shield against danger, a protector. Beyond measure, for Daniels, every one of those visits reinforced the truth. Rex had not just saved a life, he had reshaped how people viewed courage, loyalty, and the very meaning of being a K9. And so, the legend of Rex lived on, not as a tale of disobedience, but as a story of instinct, bravery, and the undeniable bond between man and dog. He reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come not from following orders, but from knowing when to break them. Rex had proven that courage is not about obedience, it is about heart, and as Daniels walked the quiet streets, on future patrols with Rex by his side, he carried with him a profound respect for the partner who had taught him that the truest kind of loyalty is not blind, it is wise, protective and unyielding in the face of danger. For in the end, Rex was more than a K9. He was a hero beyond orders. So, if you believe Rex truly deserves the title of a hero, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to K9 Era for more inspiring and heart-stopping true stories of K9 bravery, because sometimes the most extraordinary heroes walk on four paws.